welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another interesting and insightful conversation. Let's pause and think about what is Goldilocks reminding us. Goldilocks is reminding us about how to get things just right in life. When I want to lay down on a bed or sit on a chair, I want to make sure it's not too hard or too soft. When I sit down to eat, I want to make sure my food is not too hot and not too cold. Each of us know this inherently as children. Observe children. They know exactly what they want, when they want, how they want, and they know how to manipulate every adult in their life to get it just right for them. Right? Pets and children know this. As adults, when we grow up, we let social conditioning change us. And you're going to love today's conversation. We're meeting with Professor Ahuvia, and we are going to be talking about how to get relationships with things and the things and situations and interests and hobbies just right, so that it's serving us and it's serving the environment we exist in. So welcome, Professor Ahuvia, to the Goldilocks program. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. It was really a pleasure to be here.
My joy too. As we get started, what got you interested in researching and writing about relationships to things and activities?
I've always been really interested in issues around materialism. We are an incredibly materialistic culture, and I've always myself personally had a little bit of an internal conflict around this. I grew up in a very intellectual, progressive culture, Ann Arbor, Michigan, with lots of hippies back in the day. And being materialistic was considered a very bad thing. And I pride myself on being relatively non-materialistic compared to some. And that offers me a lot of freedom in my life to do what I want to do. And so that's been a very important goal for me. But I also had this side of my personality where I liked entrepreneurial things. I liked starting businesses. I liked making money. It feels to me, I don't really care that much about spending money, but I kind of like making money. It feels good. And I feel successful. And so I've always been interested in how these two things come together and how to hit a balance where sort of materialism doesn't take over your life, but you're able to enjoy the many wonderful things we have around us in our society.
So it's interesting to me how you couple the two. Material is necessary, how you define success, and how they go hand in hand and how they influence one another. Mm-hmm. So what's coming up for me is a lot of times people have this misconception that if my definition of success is this, I need to do whatever it takes to get there. Mm-hmm. But the reality is it's what you would do to get there is what shapes your character. I want to get rich, I can work hard, but I can't go and kill my neighbor and take everything, right? So what we would do to get what we want, or what we define as success and what we aspire to materially collect, that is the character. So how do you see that concept and the character and how each of us show up? And how can we intentionally influence a society where character is balanced and therefore everything is in perspective?
It's very common for people to set a financial goal. I want to have X dollars. I want to earn X dollars per year. And I understand that, and I do understand that the cost of living is very high now. I look at my son, particularly my younger son, who just got his first professional job and is making a salary that seems, when I hear the number, to be like, oh, that's a good salary. And then when I look at how he's living and how little it buys him, I have a lot of sympathy for people, who feel squeezed financially and want to make more money. So that's great. I mean, not great, but you get a lot of understanding from me on that. That said, there's many surveys that have been done, and they ask people, how much money would you need to feel comfortable? And it doesn't matter how much money people earn. They always think 30 to 40% more would make them feel comfortable. So whatever dollar sign you are earning right now, there is someone earning 30, 40% less than you thinking, oh, if I only had that amount, that would do it. I'd be fine. And whatever that number is in your head, there's somebody there who is earning that much thinking, oh, this isn't enough. If I only had 40% more, I'd be fine. So just give up for the most part on this idea that you're going to really earn some magic number and that's going to be success for you. I really think it makes much more sense to focus on what you can be successful at and what you enjoy doing and what you find meaningful. There is a lot of focus in our culture pushing people, sort of like do what you love and the money will follow. That's sometimes true, but you do need to be realistic. There's a lot of jobs that people take on. A lot. If it was really true that do what you love and the money will follow, there'd be 5 million people in America making money as movie stars. And there's not 5 million people. There's 50 people making money as movie stars, or whatever it is. It's a very small number, right? So you need to look at what your skills are, what the economy has a demand for, but then also very much what you enjoy the process of doing and what you find meaningful. And if you can find something that you're good at, you'll be successful. And the success is really what makes you feel good. There's a wonderful study that was done some years ago that looked at married couples where they shared the income together. So the standard of living for the married couple, for the husband and the wife, was the same for both of them. They pooled all the money. But one member of the household earned a lot more money than the other member of the household. And they looked at their satisfaction with their standard of living. And it turned out it was very strongly related to how much money each person earned, and not at all related to how much money together as a couple that they had. So the person who is, earning less money, but living a high standard of living, didn't necessarily feel that good about it, whereas the person who's earning more money felt successful. So I don't think you need to earn a lot of money to feel successful, but you need to be good at what you do to feel successful. And you need to feel that you're recognized for being good at what you do. And so you could go into a lower paid career, but if it's something you're good at and you're going to feel successful, that's going to pay off for you. And then that goes along with that is learning to live within your means. I've been lucky as a business school professor. Our salaries are fine. We're not underpaid individuals. So I don't want to give a false impression there. But there are a lot of people that I work with who really have let their desire for that, 20, 30% more salary run their life. And I've always been of the view that I'm going to do what I want to do. And the money, and build my lifestyle around what I can afford. And that's been a great source of pleasure and success for me.
That's something that totally resonates for me. I'm a 34-year international finance practitioner and a 24-year graduate school professor. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. You don't make a lot of money as a professor, but you get a lot of emotional and psychological rewards.
Right.
That sustains itself. And then we have these entrepreneurial endeavors that supplements what you don't have so that you can live the life you want without, worrying about trying to make too much, because sometimes too much money also brings too much kind of concerns and troubles. What's coming up for me is a question of how much does culture have to do with how much is enough? I was born and raised in Sri Lanka, part of the third world community. I even quarrel with the word third world because we're exploited nations. We were rich before we were exploited. So, coming from where we are today, we don't need a lot to live because societally there is so much that is shared. If one person has a car down the street and another person has a vacuum cleaner and one person has a washing machine and another person has a TV, the whole community has everything, right? Each of us don't need to have everything to feel like we have everything we need. And it's also a part of the world where if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, 4 billion people live per capita household income less than 1,500 US dollars a year.
Mm-hmm.
But the purchasing power parity and the cost of living and the lifestyle is such that they can be happy. Can they accomplish more if they had more? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not depressed. They live happy lives. So how much does culture and our upbringing and our psychological framework have to do with chasing material or saying how much is enough?
Oh, it's very much a part of this. And so it plays out in a number of different ways. So in terms of the scientific research on this, for the most part, now you have an interesting story coming from Sri Lanka. That's quite a different cultural background from people who are growing up in the United States and are low income growing up in the United States. Because in Sri Lanka, it's sort of, this is how it is, right? Everyone has this income. Most people have this income unless you're one of the few tiny elites. But in America, if you're growing up low income, you see everybody around you and you're told who has more money and you're told, oh, you have low income because you're a bad person. And if you were a good person, you'd be wealthier. So in general, the drive, the sort of belief that having money is important, the less money you grow up with, the more likely you are to prioritize having money. And that's a very stable kind of finding, and it makes a lot of sense. If you grow up, I grew up sort of not upper middle class, just sort of nice, solid middle class, but my parents, my dad was a university professor, and there was a sense that there was always going to be enough. It's okay, don't worry about it. So that really helped me develop a little bit more of a relaxed attitude towards some of these things. The flip side, though, is that when you grow up with less money, even though you think, look, it's really important to have money, your set of expectations is fairly low. You grew up in an environment where you didn't have a lot of stuff. So what feels like money to you doesn't need to be that high of a number. Whereas you have a lot of people who grew up in more affluent families, and that sets a high standard of living in their mind. So they come out and they say, oh, I'm not materialistic, money isn't important to me. But then they're like, hey, wait a minute. When I was living with my parents, we had this nice house and this nice car, and we bought our groceries at Whole Foods, and we had, fresh fish every night. And, now I'm I'm in this tiny room in a shared house or whatever it is. And they can feel very resentful about that. Even though in their mind they think money isn't important to me, they still have this image in their head of like, what lifestyle should I be leading? And it's based on their youth, which was very affluent.
That makes total sense. It absolutely makes sense. And I consider myself very lucky growing up on an island. You're never starving because fish and crabs and lobster and shrimp is everybody can have access to it. You go get your own, right?
Yeah.
And fruit trees grow. So there are so many things you take for granted when you're in a naturally rich environment with no winter, right? So climate has a lot to do with it. The culture has a lot to do with public policy, 100% taxpayer funded education, 100% taxpayer funded healthcare and infrastructure. So those are the three things tax money buys you. And the rest you figure it out. So cost of living is not that high when healthcare and education and infrastructure is provided, right? And 3 generations living together, homes are built to last, passed down from generation to generation. So all of this, the composite goes into making it. And the Western world or the United States where we're sitting, some of these things are beyond luxury for everyday families, right? So when we start thinking of what shapes our attachment to things, where does that come from? Part of it is what we had in our youth and what we grew up, which was our normal. what are the other things that influences our desire to collect material?
Well, there's a number of sort of different aspects to this. So one that we've focused on so far is, a very pragmatic, like I need this stuff to feel safe. I need it to feel okay. When you look at things that people really love, things where you say to someone, if there was something in your home that you really care about, you'd be heartbroken if you lost this thing, right? It's never that stuff. It's never the stuff that makes you feel like, okay, I'm going to make it through, at a practical level. Very interestingly, when people started doing research on this, they assumed that people who had strong social relationships with other people wouldn't really feel very strongly attached to objects, and that people who felt strongly attached to objects were doing it to make up for a lack of social relationships with people. And what we've discovered is that that's not true. In fact, some people are just good at forming relationships, and they form relationships with people, and they also form relationships with objects. And other people don't form attachments, they don't get that emotionally attached, and they don't get emotionally attached to people or objects. And then the other aspect that I think is even more important in that regard is that most of the time, at first glance, we think our relationship with an object is about like me and the object, as if, in the relationship. But really, it's always what Russell Belka, another researcher, calls person, thing, person. So it's always me, the object, and then some other person the object connects me to. Obvious example, a photograph. Like, I really cherish this photograph. Why? Well, because it's me, the object, and then the other person I'm with the photograph that it connects me to, and that's what's really going on. So the things that people really love most are always turn out to be objects that remind them of other people, connect them to other people. Maybe it's a keepsake, but maybe it's a television set. And you talk to someone, oh, you really love it. I just love my TV. Why? Well, because me and the kids, we all get together on, certain nights and we watch the movies together, and I get to snuggle with my kids in front of the TV set. So it's really not about the stupid TV set. It's about the way the TV set creates a situation that lets you connect with these other people. So one of the things I would say to the audience here is, when you think about things that you love in your life, think about the ways that they might help you connect to other people, and keep that in mind. If you really want to have things in your life that make your life richer, think about things that will help you form connections and maintain connections to other people, because those are the things you're really going to love in the long run.
I truly appreciate the connection to memory,
Mm-hmm.
because in life, the only thing that is lasting is the memories and the impact we create. Everything else ends at a particular time. So before we open this up to our live audience, I want you to talk a little bit about the importance of that impact memory association to feel good and feel fulfilled. And also tell our audience how they can get a hold of you so that they can have this conversation and maybe even seek your help in trying to figure out how they put their life in perspective.
Yeah. So the memory is a really good point. And in general, people who spend their money on activities tend to be happier with those purchases than people who spend it on physical objects. And the reason it's so surprising is you think, well, the physical object's going to last a long time. But actually, the people who spend it on, when you buy an activity, it creates a memory. And the memory becomes something that provides value to you for a long time to come. Whereas very often when you buy a physical object, it just gets put in the back of a closet and you don't really get much out of it for the long term. Now, that's not always true. There are some very good objects that people buy that pay off for them, very long term, and that's excellent. But very often it really is spending money on events, activities, especially things that are going to help you build relationships that you're going to do with other people. They're going to build those relationships with the other people. In terms of getting in touch with me, I've got a website called thethingswelove.com. So the book is called The Things We Love, How Our Passions Connect Us and Make Us Who We Are. And the website is called thethingswelove.com. And there's a contact form there if you want to get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor Aaron. So Robin and Dr. Menon, go ahead. I know, Robin, you're ready for the question.
Yeah, this is really a very fascinating conversation because I am a stuff person. But I also say I spend more of my money on experiences than on things. Although I do have a lot of things, mainly books. You see behind me? That's real. Actually, this is a virtual. It's a virtual picture of my real bookcase. So that's a real picture. But if you see the real desk, it'd be papers covering it. So I use a virtual one. But I want to go back to where you're talking about people being happy and feeling that they do something well and they get recognition for it. That is more important or more happiness building than just merely having more money. So I'm wondering, is there a way have you looked into people being able to derive that inside versus getting outward praise? And what is the ratio between knowing within yourself that you do good at that, you're good at this and you feel good about that, versus needing or wanting to get outward recognition? I think there's both, but have you studied what is the ratio?
So I can tell you that it's a nice show, the Goldilocks show. It really is one of these Goldilocks phenomenon about getting that balance right. In general, the less you focus on outward recognition from other people, the better. So there's a lot of work by Tim Kasser and other people that shows just sort of a general effect that the more you prioritize actions and activities with the hope of like, I'm going to do this thing, other people are going to be impressed with me, other people are going to respond positively to me for this. That goes along with lower levels of happiness, higher levels of problematic behaviors, drugs, alcohol, lower levels of health, higher levels of stress, just, right down the list of all sorts of not very good things. However, to balance that out, there's also should be a recognition that human beings are fundamentally social animals. I mean, the desire, and it asked people, have you felt, significantly disrespected in the past week? That was basically the question, something along those lines. And very few. Good news is most people had not. It was maybe 10% or less. Don't quote me on the exact number, but somewhere around there, 10% or less, said, yes, I felt disrespected in the past week. But those people who answered yes, they were miserable. That was just, that was a really bad situation for them. And that's fundamental to ourselves. We are always paying attention to other people. We always care what other people think about us. So sometimes we can be such an individualistic culture that we can sort of beat ourselves up in all sorts of directions. So we beat ourselves up. I'm not good enough because I'm not successful, and I'm not good enough because I care too much about being successful. And you just find one more reason to get down on yourself around those things. So what I would say is work to try and find measures of success that you can feel good about that aren't dependent on other people. Work to engage in activities that you really personally enjoy the activity and not something that you think is just going to impress other people. But then when you realize that, if I'm really honest at the bottom of it, I still care what other people think, don't get down on yourself for that, because that's like needing to sleep and eat. Human beings are going to care what other people think.
You're muted, Cass.
Thank you. Thank you. What a wonderful question, Robin, and love the answer. Go ahead, Nandini.
Hi. I was listening to your conversation earlier, and I did a course on the science of well-being, and a lot of the things you brought up were in there, where they talked about, self-awareness and self-compassion, and recognizing that material things, you keep coveting the next best thing, and so it is creating memories and creating experiences that actually give you happiness. And I was struck during your conversation that you said, you know, it is attachment to objects and people that give us a disconnect, and to understand and go deeper into the root of why we're attached to a certain object or a certain person. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more, because coming from an Eastern culture where we're always like told, don't be attached. Like one of the tenets of Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma is, release your attachments, or Buddhism, release your attachments. And I was hearing that, and the spiritual and philosophical part of me was like, interesting, So I was wondering if you could comment on that, and if you had any insight to that particular aspect of materialism and how it plays into happiness. Thank you.
Wow, what a great question. And I should say on background, I'm a regular meditator. I just got back from a 4-day silent retreat a couple of weeks ago, which was sort of based on Buddhist practice. And I've had the opportunity, I've worked with a very famous Buddhist thinker named Mathieu Ricard. We've written some stuff together. I've had the opportunity to pick his brain about some of these issues. I've actually thought about writing some sort of a paper called "Attachment and Non-Attachment" because it's a very deep issue. What Mathieu said to me when I asked him about this is, he said, and I've heard this from a lot of Buddhist thinkers, it's only a problem if it's a problem. So if you have attachments, and certainly attachments to other people, I sometimes wonder about this in Buddhist philosophy. I wonder if there was a period when, child mortality was much higher than it is today, that maybe a certain amount of just non-attachment even to other people was a form of a protective mechanism, because loss was so common that you were worried about that a lot. And there are also forms of attachment that are very pernicious. I mean, ideally, you connect to another person, you feel that they become part of who you are, and your response to that is generous. It is, because they are part of who I am, I care about their well-being, I want them to do well, I'm going to be generous to them, and empathetic and caring, etc. But there is also a possibility that some narcissistic people have, which is, because they are part of who I am, I don't have to worry about them. I can take all I want from them and just focus on myself. So there are positive and negative forms of attachment, but my view is that if you keep the attachment positive, especially with people, it really is those connections to other people that make our lives richer. And I know there's a quote that I heard at this retreat that I thought was fascinating. And it was from one of, forgive me if I don't get the details exactly right, since we're doing this from memory, but it was the Buddha talking to one of his disciples, and the disciple says, I think that my friendship with you and with the other people who are studying this is an important part of our practice together. And the Buddha says, no, it is the entirety of our practice together. So clearly, there was a recognition of the importance of these kinds of attachments. And I do think there's ways of having those attachments that are really healthy. And it is going to leave you a little vulnerable. Like if you become very attached to another person, and when they die, it's going to be harder on you. than it would be if you did not have that attachment. But it's worth it.
Mhm. I'm absolutely delighted with this conversation. Nandini and I come from the same Hindu upbringing. And so I love where you went with this, Nandini. And I would love to add what Professor Erin was talking about. All my readings and immersion into the culture and the philosophy, which I had the honor of reading it in its original language because I read and write Tamil, one of the oldest human languages in the world, talks about the creator, the energy, the soul that is in this body, and the attachments to things and people and situations we have. And death in the Hindu philosophy is, in Hindu way of thinking, is lassoing the attachment away from the body so that it's like it's eclipsing the relationship between the soul and the maker. And by lassoing and removing the attachment, now the soul can actually see and connect to its maker. And we're also taught from young age, if you grew up in the culture, there's a difference between connection and attachment. So be connected to everything because you're all connected to the same source, but don't get attached because attachment belongs to the ego, right? And so the example that comes to my mind is water lily or lotus leaf is immersed in water. It sits in water, but if you lift it, not a drop of water sits on it.
Yeah.
How do you live a life connected to everything and yet not attached to anything? Gives you the true freedom, which is nirvana, means the nakedness of the soul, that you can truly connect to your maker. So nirvana is just that. So Buddhism is a sect of Hinduism. It pulls that aspect from the Hindu philosophy. So to me, it makes sense.
Yeah. I'd also say that in the book, if you're interested, I have a chapter that deals with, in terms of the science of evolution, the expanding domains of connection is the term you use. And I love what you said about connection and attachment. I'd never heard that distinction before. And I think it could be really useful because a lot of what I think in English, the word attachment really covers both of those things, and they could well be different. I haven't explored it well enough to know if they are, but they might well be a little bit different. Certainly when we talk about attachment to people that we love, we really mean connection to the people that we love as well. But in the book, I talk about the evolution of animals. So the early animals, the earliest, who were like only interested in their own physical body and its maintenance. Then you get a level where animals start to be interested in protecting their children and their mate. And so they have this extended self, and they do that because they see their children and their mate as part of their own identity. Then you get another layer as evolution goes on, and now we start to look at our community, our tribe, and we have the sense of connection to them, and we become interested in them. And then eventually we're able to connect with things even that aren't human, beyond our tribe, the world, objects. And certainly in a lot of Eastern philosophy, the goal is to connect to the whole universe, right? So you could say this is non-attachment. You could also say, well, maybe it's attachment to everything in this way. So that's certainly worth looking into.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Professor Erin, for engaging in this and sharing your wisdom. And to our live audience, absolutely appreciate you showing up week after week to engage with our guest. And to our audience out there, think about what Professor Erin talked to you today. How do you keep perspective of the things you love? And how do you leverage that to drive your own happiness and build a peaceful life so that you get your life just right? You get your family and your environment and what matters to you just right. Because in the end, that is the most important thing in life. Did you build a life that is happy? Did you build a life that was meaningful? And do you feel fulfilled? And what do you love? And are you living the life you love?